Hello and welcome to this week's program for the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. Every week we try to connect people with inspirational stories and fascinating ideas that have to do with innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. As a club, we like to bring people together from places near and far. We like to look at new approaches for improving our communities. So we are glad that you've joined us. We have a very interesting guest speaker today. His name is Lee Knight Jr. We're sure you're going to enjoy the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to hand it over to club member Rushton Hurley for some other proper introductions, and we'll talk to you at the end of the program.
Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you here. I'm excited about the opportunity for you to hear our speaker today. Our speaker is Lee Knight Jr. And Lee and I met fairly recently when a group from my wife's school got together. And Lee and I are both the significant others of people who work at that school. And it was just a holiday kind of gathering, and we had the chance to share some ideas and find that we both shared a connection to Japan, which is actually where Nate is joining us from at 2 a.m. Huge style points to Nate. And Lee is someone for whom the power of stories is not something he merely appreciates. It's that which he's organized his life around, and he is a professional slam poet. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Lee, who will tell a little bit more about himself and give us this week's program. Lee, it's yours.
Good afternoon and good morning to those who are starting with us late and in distant places. My name is Lee Knight Jr. I've been a slam poet for about 15 years. Slam poetry is a form of competitive poetry that was started in 1987 by a man named Mark Smith in Chicago, wherein he was tired of people going to open mics and not having any way to actually judge and talk about the poetry that was being done. So they made a system of 5 judges. The scores are 0 through 10, and 0 through 5 being on performance, and the other 0 through 10 being on performance, the other 10 being on content. And they drop the highest and the lowest, and the highest score is 30. Now, every large college and major city in the US has a slam poetry team. And once a year, we have a national competition where 2,000 poets from every state, including a couple places in Europe, France, Vancouver has a team, come and we battle it out. This decide who's the top 4 team poets in the country, and then the top 10 individual poets in the country. So it's a large kind of scene, and a lot of colleges and high schools have this medium for people to express themselves through their art. And I specialize in storytelling, which I've found through travel, and I've done a lot of tours in Germany, which is surprising, but the storytelling is very popular in Germany, Hawaii, surprising enough in Italy. So they have a lot of slam poetry teams. Now, me, having grown up in America, my stories are social and they share. Like growing up in Carmel, my mom was superintendent of schools, and during the science portion of a typical 4th grade afternoon, my classmates and I drew random animal names out of a hat for a report. Glancing at the name I drew, I said, "What if you never seen one before?" My teacher turned her soft gaze away from my brown face towards the blackboard, grasped white chalk in her pink hands, and she wrote, "Chameleon." She said, "To protect itself, a chameleon changed the shades of its skin to match its environment." A child's voice from the back of the class said, "Then why is Lee so dark?" Laughs filled the classroom. My 10-year-old frown was a black speck in a sea of white smiling faces, merciless jeers, cruel laughter that echoes in your ears like a crank organ played by a man with peanuts in his pockets, and you're the monkey. I didn't understand the joke, but I felt the punchline at recess. The fists of children punching, smashing against fragile esteem. Change schools, monkey boy, change color. So painful purple bruises faded into camouflage. Dark melanin changed into a defense mechanism, hues altered by the melancholy melanin melody of Lee Knight Jr. evolving into a cultural chameleon. Do you hear the song of my skin, or just the sorrow of my diction? When I speak, what do I sound like? I'm told that I talk white, which is funny because I never knew white was a language. If it is, I would like to learn it. Perhaps some would understand me better and I them. Instead, some say exceptional, well-spoken, too clear, too eloquent to be Black. A little bit like Obama. I hear house Negro, whitewashed. My parents pushed me to read because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Peers punished me for having read too much. Audible misconceptions made me a prisoner of pigmentation, a colored colonist of the king's English, a freed slave of slang. Chameleons change shades, not colors, so I use my words and my hues to blend in. But then to some Blacks, I become a carbon copy of Caucasian culture. They say you're an Oreo, you're a sellout. I hear you're not Black enough, vowels not dark enough, syllables not deep enough to detect the tone in my skin. Black voice, tongue tied to the pink flesh in the roof of my mouth, held back by lack of proper hue of audible obsidian. But what they can't see is that I am so Black when it's hot, I sweat the blues. I'm so connected with my ancestors. Whenever I'm lost or alone, the shadows of 3.5 Africans point me in the right direction. My racial pride is so deep that even on the bottom of the ocean, I can reach into the sky, past the pale white clouds, grab the pitch darkness of space, pull it into myself, creating eternal day, making my deepness so Black that I am the only night known to man. But sound has no color. My adaptation, a defense mechanism, not a choice. I learned to be a chameleon. Being human wasn't enough. Born of one nature, one color, one way, forced to split into a two-sided sonic prison to protect myself from the blaring white noise of stereotypes ever since the age of 10. Handed my report back to my teacher, smiling. She said, "Did you learn something about chameleons you didn't know before?" I replied, "I learned how to survive in a hostile environment without changing who I am." And that was Chameleon. That's kind of like a signature poem of mine. In 2006, I took fourth in the country out of 800 poets, and that was the first one I opened up with. And it was in Austin, which is why I really like Austin. The mayor was there. But that's a reflection of the kind of poetry that I do, wherein it's a story that's all true, but it's holding the meat and the what I really want to say in between it, like a patty, like a burger bun, where you need the bread to like have people follow you into a place that may be uncomfortable, but we'll get through it together because I made through it okay. And I think the problem with society nowadays is kids don't talk story, they don't tell story, they don't share these stories that we need to know about one another. Like if I knew, and like in pictures, like I knew like how, if you of course look at the pictures of course my family that I put up, as you can see, like there's my mom, my sister, my brother, like we all lived in the Carmel Highlands, which we were the first Black family to own a house there in 1969. My mom bought it because she wanted me to grow up in a house and not a military base. And I think it reflected me and how I viewed the world growing up, and how things are better being shared through by story, by telling people what we've gone through. And being a superintendent of schools, my mom, she, you know, Monterey was very nice, but after Monterey, we moved to South Central LA, which is my mom felt that it was important that I have more culture in my upbringing. I guess I would have ended up like Carlton on the Fresh Prince, if you know what I mean, because we were in Carmel. I mean, there was nothing to do but hike, and I hung out with hippies and walked my dog. And so, let me see. So going to an area that was predominantly Black, she thought was kind of important, and she wanted to give back to the community that had given her so much. So during my studies, I ended up studying abroad in North Wales because, again, I like to travel a lot, as you can see during my time in Japan. So when I was 6, stores were sold out of the must-have action figure of the holiday season, my hero, the Bionic Man. Yet I had one. Through the alchemy of innocence, plastic and rubber became gold in my hands. I broke it in a week. My mother bought me another, and for years it was the only toy I never broke. A few years ago, I asked her, "Mom, why did you get me the second Bionic Man?" She replied, "Because children always remember the little things." I studied overseas in North Wales for 6 months, returning home with memories as bitter as cold Earl Grey. 3 years later, through the process of ethnic elimination, I received a phone call beginning with hello and ending with daddy. Sent a daycare class photo of Phoebe, flanked by cookie cutter children with cobalt eyes wearing flaxen hair like Guinness foam. Phoebe's hair, obsidian ringlets falling like a poorly written script. Her face, a shade on a sheet of sunlight. Brown eyes smiling like a plot twist, filling me with unexpected joy. But how do you raise a child over the phone? How do you hold her? You can't explain that her blessed existence was a result of alcohol and fate finding the Achilles heel and a Trojan. But earthquakes teach us that a fault can shake the earth. So fatherhood became my Richter scale, trying to retrofit it with phone calls and one yearly visitation. Being called daddy and looking to the eyes of a daughter who doesn't know you, but needs to, is like being given a pen and a dictionary with words missing. But we spend 5 days in Fantasyland laughing at the Incredibles. We finish stories we never started, and we start plots with no ending. I hold her hand like a comma. She reads my smile like the funny papers. We play for fading hours, light celebrating night, and then we slept like trembling bark tracks parallel to the same goodbye, years distance to our next hello, and then she was gone. I began to work hard enough to hate myself less for making her another stereotypical skin statistic. But I remember my mother told me, it's the little things that children remember. So I wrote to her, dearest Phoebe, I think of you every day and I wish I could tuck you in every night, but I live across the sea. Daddy. Daddy's just a broken bionic man trying to be Mr. Incredible. All I can give you aside from my words are my love and books and a lifetime to make them all make sense until you have enough stories to build your own childhood and sufficient words to define yourself. Alone on the beach at night, baby sea turtles hatch and they head toward the brightest spot on the horizon, the moon shining in the ocean, and by memory, they find home. So I'm sending you this stuffed turtle so you know you'll always find your father across the sea. And the book, Goodnight Moon, so you know that you and I are looking at the same sky. When you tell the moon good night, I can hear you. I love you, Daddy. I sent this letter and this poem of blank lines so she can write the ending. Until then, I can only hope like a sea turtle. She finds a way across the beach at childhood, still looks at the moon shining on the horizon and says, good night. How do you raise a child over the phone? How do you hold her? You aspire to be a big enough man to always remember the little things. And that's 12 minutes, and I'm ready for your questions. I wish I had time for more, but we had some technical problems, but that was fun. But that's me talking story. That's me sharing stories and sharing parts of my life with people who understand.
So before we kind of get into the questions, I want to introduce the other folks on the call. So we've got in Kamloops, British Columbia, we've got Roger. Roger, good to see you, my friend. In the East Bay, we've got two of our members. We've got Andrew Tao, our president-elect. We've got the man of the myth, the legend, Stephen Shagrin, Paella Master. All right.
And Treasure of Storytelling Association of California.
Exactly, exactly, and who delivers amazing food to those who order through the service he helps with. And in Japan, at some ridiculous hour of the day, we've got Nate, who fronts the complaints department band, right? And who started everything with this recording. My name is Rushton Hurley. I am a past president of this club, and I am so jazzed to have the kind of stories, Lee, that you shared. Now, Lee, when I think of something like competitive poetry, and I think about your stories, there is a certain amount of opening yourself up, right? Like like this is what I really think, this is who I really am, that comes across. When you think of the very best poetry, to what degree does it need to conform to that sense of how to tell a story? I mean, can you not open yourself up? Can that not be there and still deliver the kind of poetry that is top tier?
Yes, I would say, yeah, we usually call it I gotta forget the term. If you want to be less personal but still be connect to your audience, you do another character. You portray yourself. I've heard a poem about Peter Pan and Captain Hook told from Captain Hook's point of view, right? And so if you really want to express something, you can do it through. I'm a part of also a duet where me and another poet have we're a duet. So we do this one poem about Darfur, and we're both people who were killed in Darfur talking to each other about our lost home. So that way you can share a story that's not yours. There's a really interesting story about this Jewish woman who actually married an SS officer to survive World War II. And we call the poem Passing, because now that would be considered, oh my God. But that time, it was very important. And it kind of tells us what we do to survive. But things like that, I wasn't alive then, but you can express to somebody and things I deal with now without it being really personal or really, you know, it's good. And I think that's a way to share a story without being extremely personal. You can be another character. You can be someone else. You can be Lot as she's leaving. I've heard a poem like that, leaving Gomorrah, right? And it's like, I would never think to write like that. But when somebody does, it inspires you to be like, well, I can do this. I can do this. And I can tell a story how I see it. And that's what makes it beautiful.
I think everybody in that setting becomes more creative as a function of the inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's really important, I think, especially to children. As kids, we always, I don't know if everybody else remembers, but you used to be giving words of the week where you'd have to spell them and you'd have to do a little story using those words. That was like my favorite part. Like you can make any kind of story you want. And we missed that somehow growing up. We like stories. We like gathering around together and sharing our experiences and how other people can be helpful, learn from them. And I think if we put that into children, it grows up into us. You know what I mean?
Let's open this up to other folks. Nate, I see that you're unmuted. So if you have a comment or a question, kick in.
Yeah, well, first comment, that way cool, man. Like that was really neat. I really enjoyed that. It's yeah, I'm not, I like music. I write, music for my band and stuff like that. And lyrics, of course, are very important to me, which is what I spend more time thinking about. So that was just really a neat way to approach telling a story. I've seen poetry slams done at international schools I've taught at. They're of a different nature kind of thing. But first, very quick question. Do you see any of this happening in Japan? And because you've obviously lived here before and you travel around the world, so do you see in Japan, and in general, what do you see in schools do to kind of nurture this approach to telling stories? Because as a history teacher, for me, the approach I like to take is actually to tell a story and help it connect, students to the, their lives kind of thing. So
I think there's an organization called Brave New Voices, which goes to high schools. In fact, they have a show on HBO where they show what high school kids come up with, in their poems. And sometimes it's about divorce. Sometimes it's about being the last kid in your school to have a cell phone. I've heard that one before, right? Right. Where it's like, and how isolated you feel. And the kids in Hawaii talked about how they were never taught Hawaiian because it was banned in their country. And for some reason, Chameleon, they asked me to do it again and again. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I can't speak my own language. And when I learned it, I speak like a haole. I speak like a white person speaking Hawaiian because I wasn't born into it. So I think it's important for kids to be able to open up and, like, instead of punching things or getting mad at something, you put it in your poetry how mad you are at your math teacher. And when I was in Japan, I saw one slam, but they did haiku, which is, traditionally good in Japan.
Yep.
And it's funny too, because here, I call it 575, because in Japan, a haiku, you have to have this one thing has to be nature. It has to be. And there has to be nature and a season. Here, we just said, oh, we'll put 575 together and I'm haiku. Right? But it's interesting. In Germany, for example, I have 3 minutes and 10 seconds to do a poem. In Germany, they require 10 minutes. And when I asked them why, they were like, because our language is less forgiving for rule breaking. So it's going to take them 10 minutes to express something that might take me 5, which made me really, A, read slower there, but B, think about the words that I'm using and think about how important they are to say less is more, right? Instead of me saying like, oh, Black people were mean to me. It's just like, no, I have to say it this way so people can understand what I'm going through. And it's good. I think it's important with kids, especially because you can express yourself without hurting anyone. Like I said before, you can kill time without injuring eternity.
Yeah, you're not pointing a finger kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like I can't stand poems that are just mad with no answer, with no like, oh, this is this, this is this. Okay, so okay, racism is bad. Do you have a solution? No. Well, why are you telling me something I already know? That's like saying, you know, gravity's heavy. Yeah, right. You know, give me
What
a
makes it
solution.
heavy?
Yeah, it's like give me a solution so I just don't feel bad about it. Like, you know, give me a way out. And if you found a way out, let me follow you.
It's awesome. That's kind of a Rotary thing. It's like, yeah, there are problems out there.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can we do? Right.
Exactly.
Speaking of Rotary and long-term Rotary history, like decades and decades, Shags, I think you've got a comment or question. Cut loose.
Yeah, that was an amazing presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I've seen a lot of poetry slams since coming out to California and discovering the Storytelling Association. I'm not so much a professional or even amateur storyteller, the way the members rank in our ranks are, but I have a great appreciation for it. So thank you for bringing that talent to the world. And just as by way of information, gravity is because the earth sucks.
Hashtag Shags moment right there for sure.
And check your and Lee, also check your chat. If you scroll down the bottom, you'll see all those commands. Check chat. I put the link to our group in case you're not familiar with us.
Okay, cool.
Cool. We'll get you there. We'll get you there for sure. Okay, Roger, I know that you've got a thought there.
Yeah, thank you, Lee, very much for the presentation. I before tuning in today, what I did is I went on to YouTube and I saw a couple of your presentations.
Wow. Wow.
But first of all, I've had difficulty understanding the concept of slam poetry and just where it comes from and the scope of the poetry in terms of whether or not it's strictly in free form or is there any, how can I say, characteristics of the form of expression which would one would determine to be slam poetry. When I first read your, when I first listened to it, it reminded me of Robert Service, except that Robert Service seemed to be much more structured in his presentation. I'm looking forward to what you have to say. Is what is slam poetry?
It's funny because it's a debate with the slammers a lot, but I think the former president of PSI, Poetry Slam Incorporated, he said it best: a slam poem is any poem that you do on stage in front of an audience that will be judged, right? Because I've done a cover slam where I've done Jabberwocky, which is the first poem I ever memorized when I was like 7, and I changed the way I did it. Right, so I did it on Halloween, so it was kind of scary, but I'm like, no, that's a slam poem. I'm a big Dickinson fan, and some people would say, well, it's not slam. If you do it on stage, right, it's a slam poem. But there's stereotypical slam poems that you might hear that are somebody's yelling and somebody's, it's a call to action. I can't stand those, right? Right? It's just kind of like, and that's a stereotypical slam. But I think to define a regular slam poem, something that's 3 minutes and 10 seconds long, original, and with no props, and is being written to be read in front of an audience. Because on paper, I'm good. In front of an audience, I have to practice because you have to understand everything I'm saying clearly. And so a slam poem, I would say, is anything you do on stage that you know is going to be judged. People are going to put up a score and say, I don't agree, I agree. And yeah, so yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I want to get Andrew in as well. Andrew.
Can I share a bad dad joke first?
Okay. Go with it.
It's a horrible bad dad joke, but you'll all appreciate it. I don't trust atoms. Why? Because they make up everything. Thank you. It's all about that simple. Thank you very much.
You got the right group.
Yeah.
The right group for that. All right, Andrew, you're up.
Awesome performance. Thank you so much. I'm gonna be rolling the words audible obsidian in my head for the rest of the day.
People always miss that part. I love that part.
Yeah.
I've been knowing you for years. Everybody misses that part.
And I'm like trying to puzzle out why exactly I love it so much. Both like the tactile and the kind of intangential. It's just so weird, and it's like this perfect trochee too. So it's like it just plays super well. So you mentioned a couple times that there's like a time limit in
Yes.
competition. Is it because of like stamina, like the performance, the stamina that's required in performance? That
Honestly, it's audience. You can keep people's attention for about 3 minutes. Like, to be honest, like usually about 3 minute 10, people are like, "Did I leave the iron on?" I mean, you can hold it for 3 minutes. And if we also, when we time ourselves, we know if it's a funny poem, do 2 minutes 30 seconds because laughter takes up a lot longer than you think. And with me, like I stretched out these longers, but there's parts where I'll be reading kind of fast and I'll slow down at a point. Like when I speak, what do I sound like? I'll slow down there and then I'll know I got to speed up. I got to speed up because the clock is going. And it's funny, we'll have people in the audience who would do symbols like this is 2:45, this is 2:50, and at 3 minutes we start doing this, like wrap it up, because people won't really listen after that. Yeah. Which is sad, but I don't blame them. It's like the length of a commercial.
right.
Yeah.
About that though, if you talk about the audience having certain kinds of signals for the performer, you're not talking about the judges, you're talking about the audience, right?
Well, no, we have other poets in the audience who, especially if you're in a competition, they help you.
Right.
And so like when I perform, especially if it's a good competition, I'll have a good friend in the audience with a stopwatch and we all have the same signals. So I'll see him put up his hand and I'm at 2:40, right? It's like, I'm at 2:45. And then you'll start going like this and like, I have to wrap it up. And it's funny because when you go to other states, you'll see the same kind of symbols, right? Where people don't want to go over time because you can't win. Like when I took fourth, we were it was a competition, it was the top 12 poets. They're cutting 4 poets every round. In the very last round, it's me and the top 4 poets, and whoever wins is first, second, third, and fourth. And I'm doing a poem and the microphone keeps on bending. And no matter what I do, it keeps on bending. And I went, Jesus. And when I did that, Rachel McKibben's a poem who I love, slammed her hand on the stage, letting me know they just started the clock. Because as soon as you make connection with the audience, it starts. And as soon as they heard me go, Jesus, right? It was like, it started. So I went straight into my poem, which was actually good because the poets started like cheering because they knew like they just started the clock. And that's kind of important because it keeps you succinct and it keeps you knowing that you're not just reading to everyone. You're reading to like individuals who you have to keep their attention. Like teaching kids, you have to grab each particular one. Otherwise, you're going to miss one. He's going to say something like, it sucks. It's going to take somebody else's away from learning.
Now, you told a story when we talked. You mentioned how German audiences responded to your writing in ways that were far more specific than you'd had in other places.
Yeah.
Could you tell that little story, Ito, and maybe give us some thoughts as to why?
It's like they would talk about different stanzas, and I always have chapbooks with my poems in it, and they would discuss like, well, in your third stanza you said this, or like in Chameleon, they went back to they were asking about the part where I'm like feeling like a man with peanuts in his pockets and you're the monkey, right? And it's interesting because in America it's implied, right? One of the derogatory terms used against blacks is monkey. However, in Germany it was just kind of like they asked, so do you feel that you're the peanuts or the monkey or but they understood the richness of what I was trying to say. And there would be specific example when about my daughter. And when I went back to the same question, I like the fact that only in Germany they would point out that I like that you asked a question at the very beginning and you told me the answer at the very end. Which is funny because a lot of people don't notice that. They just think it's about a man, he's talking about his daughter and he misses her and he's trying to be a good dad, which is good, that's the core. But in Germany, they were to go out like, you asked me a question, I didn't know the answer and you told me the answer. And it's like, and they appreciate that. And some of the German poets are really good. They're really, but I don't speak German, but it's like only from what I heard from other Germans, it's just like, their slams are like big and like a lot of rich language and a lot of rich usage of the language. It takes them a lot longer, but it's so powerful. Plus they love to brag about Goethe and like history, they still, so it's good. It's really nice and it's different, but it's nice. And when we have our international competitions, they'll project the translated version of the person's poet on the board as they speak it, which is great. I did a slam in Rotterdam, which we were going against Paris, which was great because you can see the beauty of what you might be losing to, as opposed to going, I should have studied more French, but it's nice.
So for everybody who has joined us, thank you very much for being a part of the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley this week. As always, we ask that you let us know you're here. There is the attendance survey just down a bit. There is the discuss section. Looks like it might be discuss. It's discuss, believe it or not. All right, and down there, and you can sign in via a number of different ways and leave a comment. Leave a comment for Lee, leave a comment for us in terms of the entire meeting. Let us know, just engage with the kind of stories that we're building together as we explore how technology can serve the business of service. So with that, I would like to have Lee finish us off, and I will switch back to speaker view so we can get you. Lee, it's yours.
This is actually one of my favorites. I have a big sister, she's about 13 years older than me, and she taught me a lot. And this was when she turned 50, I wrote her this. What if somebody offered you everything? You knew it was everything because you've had everything before, so you know what it feels like. You remember what it's like to lose everything, to be left with a reasonable facsimile of some things. You know how to appreciate anything, but you're afraid of having it again because you've lost it before. Everyone's had everything once. Some didn't realize until they lost it, and some were happy to left with just something, because something is better than anything, right? When I was 6, my sister's most prized possession was her electric Singer sewing machine, a birthday gift from our grandmother. One day she made me a pair of overalls. I was so happy. I said, Dee Dee, you can make anything. She said, you already have everything. She said, can you make me a cloud? And she said, of course. And over the span of 2 weeks, my sister made a large pillow with billowy edges, placed her down pillow inside of it, used blue tie-dye on an old sheet, and on a Saturday afternoon, my sister spread the sky across our front lawn. Our heads on my clouds, we watched the whales migrate as the stars came out above the Carmel Highlands. I didn't know it then, but I do know now. She was right. I had everything. But at 6, everything is your big sister's smile on a Saturday afternoon, a bionic man, or your dog. As adults, everything and anything have become synonymous with something, which is always better than having nothing, right? I have hold on to everything enough to know that if you hold on to it, it holds on to you. I saw everything in the sunset eyes of a dying father who I finally appreciated at his dusk. I see everything in the eyes of a daughter in Wales who I can only hold annually. I see everything in the horizon faces of an audience who listened to me in 3-minute lifetimes stitching tie-dye skies. As a child, everything for me was my big sister. For her, everything for her was stitching smiles and sew pattern stitches for her baby brother. Moments with my sister, monuments with everything. And what I adore the most is she looked at me like I had everything and she was waiting for me to share it with her. I told her that Bigfoot lived under the bridge near the beach down the block, and I would take her to him when he was asleep. And if you spin fast enough and stop, the world will still spin around you. Come, Dee Dee, spin with me and I'll show you. Our weekend conversations welcomed whimsy. But on the weekdays, she picked me up from school and taught me everything that I didn't learn, from Sasquatch, centrifugal force, to the fourth planet from the sun, my sister, my everything, who now gives everything to her son and still has enough to give to me when I call and ask her, hey, Dee Dee, how's everything? The only way for all of us to have everything is to try to share it. So if I have anything, I'm going to try to give you something, because I have everything, plus a little piece of nothing, a sky that we can sit on and a cloud that'll hold our heads. I'll try to sew some whales. If you stitch the stars. Thank you.